Hello and welcome to the Skeptrack at DragonCon 2024. Thank you so much for joining us on our panel today. We have Nick Eftimiades, Curt Anderson, Jonna Mendez, and Jamy Ian Swiss. And they are all masters and mistresses of deception. So, would you like to introduce yourself, Jamy, and talk a little bit?
I'm a professional magician, an author of 6 books, and something of an expert on deception in the sense that it's a subject I have been studying all my life, and so I have written about phony psychics. Well, that's redundant, but I've lectured to law enforcement about con games and con artists. I've gone undercover looking at psychics and the like. I've advised on cheating in casino games and so forth. So I'm interested in all forms of deception.
Okay, and Jonna gave an amazing presentation yesterday about her life at the CIA, and y'all will be able to watch that video on the streaming YouTube channel, but please tell us about your experience.
Well, it's quite different from Jamie's. I come here from CIA, which is one of the centers of deception probably in the universe. We worked hand in hand with Hollywood, LA, the people out there in California, and that surprises a lot of people. As chief of disguise, we were involved with disguising not just people but things, sometimes places. It got really interesting. It got actually really fun. I was there 27 years. I ended up being chief of disguise, and then when I retired, we started writing books. My husband and I have 5 books out right now, and the 6th is underway. My husband, just for background, was named Tony Mendez, and a lot of you would have heard of him because of the movie Argo, which works its way into a lot of the conversations I have and a lot of the stories that I tell. So I'm looking forward to this hour. Should be fun.
Excellent. Curt?
So I was a professional magician for many years, and COVID made me instantly unemployed, and I wasn't sure how that was going to last, and so I ended up finishing my college degree that I started back in the 80s, and during that time I met one of the foremost authorities in human communication deception at an academic institution, got my master's degree, and I am presently working on my PhD in communication studies, specializing in deception and persuasion. And it's been really interesting to me because the world that I lived in as a magician and creating deception and dealing with deception is completely different than the way the academic world deals with deception. And so I have, over the last few years, had conversations with Jamy and Nick and got tremendous perspective from 2 gentlemen who've done this longer than I have, and I'm kind of putting these 2 worlds together, and it's been really fascinating. So I'm excited to be here and talk with all of these guys about various aspects of deception today.
Wonderful. Nick?
I'm Nick Eftimiades. Actually, John and I worked in the same office, kind of different roles at CIA, and but I didn't spend a career there. I went from there to the State Department, what we call Diplomatic Security Service, as a special agent. And then from there on to Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the military version of CIA, for the remainder of a career, and did numerous overseas tours, and basically did intel stuff in the world. So it was a life, let's say, full of deception, but that's it. Oh, and I retired in 2017 and became a professor of Homeland Security at Penn State University.
Okay, so it occurs to me, I've been at your panels this weekend, and it occurs to me, that, and I'm sure it's no surprise to anybody, but we are really fooling ourselves when you're taking advantage of our ability to fool ourselves. So, Jonna, what can you were talking about the illusions that you created and the misdirections that y'all had created. Can you talk about that, please? And am I wrong? Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right. I'm currently on the board of the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., and their motto is that nothing is what it seems to be. They've got a whole museum, 5 floors devoted to showing you exactly that. And so many of the stories that we tell in the museum wind their way back to the CIA, to things that they were imagining years and years ago, and just a really current, kind of an interesting expression of that. Probably a lot of you heard when the Key Bridge was crushed up in Baltimore by one of those huge cargo ships, banged into the bridge. The bridge fell down. It was just this massive bridge on the East Coast. It shut down American shipping. It was a huge, huge accident. And in the process of trying to figure out how to put that bridge back together, 6 people died. They had to somehow lift the bridge up from underwater, and they imported a crane from California, the largest crane in the world. It can lift 100,000 pounds up from water. And what I knew, and didn't hit the press for about a month, was the fact that that crane was a CIA crane, and that we used it years ago in an operation called the Glomar Explorer. Yeah. Howard Hughes. We knew that a Russian submarine, that they had lost a sub, a nuclear sub, had sank, and the Russians didn't know where it was, but we were. And in the most elaborate CIA operation that I was ever even peripheral to, we built an enormous ship. We said it was Howard Hughes' ship. It had that crane on it because we were going to go mine for minerals in the ocean floor. And that crane was built to lower 5 miles of pipe down to that ship and lift it up. Anyway, when the bridge went down in Baltimore, it was the only thing they could find that could possibly lift those pieces of that bridge and open the port of Baltimore. And it still isn't clear to most people that it came out of the CIA's inventory.
We're not going to tell anybody.
I was every day I read the paper, I was so happy. Nick, did you pay attention?
I laughed hysterically.
Wasn't it great?
Yeah, because the Glomar Explorer, for those who don't know, Howard Hughes provided the cover story for that. At the time, right? The time it was $350 million, which I can't imagine how much it is in current day. In current dollars.
But at the time, Howard Hughes was just a nut.
Right.
He was crazy, and everybody believed him.
And manganese modules was the cover story.
Yeah.
And so much so other companies started looking into investing in it and started pilot programs for trying that.
Yeah.
So when you just think about the thousands, the hundreds that are involved with this, hundreds and hundreds, and the thousands, tens of thousands that are actually fooled by it, it's quite an extraordinary achievement when you think about it. It's just amazing that way.
Yeah.
That was stunning. That was amazing. I love that. How do we keep from becoming paranoid, though? Like when you're not able to trust whatever, nothing is as it seems.
So here's a fundamental thing that we're really discovering academically with deception. Truth Default Theory was published in 2020. And there's aspects of it been around for about 20 years, but we're really finding, and this is, back to a conversation Jamy and I had when I was talking about going back to school for this. He's like, don't fall for that BS about, you can look somebody in the eyes and tell if they're lying to you. And this, he referred me a series of books I bought a poker player friend who said, the idea of reading poker tells isn't really a thing. And it's overblown. And so this idea, but Truth Default Theory basically says that we're not going to get paranoid because we can't function as a society. We're societal species, and that one of the things the reason people are who we are is because we work together. And if you started questioning where you felt like you couldn't trust anybody, everybody would be paranoid and nothing would get done. So by default, we just accept everything we hear is true. That's just biologically how we're made. That's a very functional thing. It makes us very vulnerable. But the nice thing is we just, when we got up here, you have a panel of people. Jamie's been on stage his entire life. How many of your first thought was, I bet that's not really his name. That's probably a stage name. Of course not. She said his name's Jamy. You just accept it's Jamy. What if any of us aren't who we say? I mean, she's from the CIA. What if this is a disguise? That's her job, right? You're actually looking at a 35-year-old gentleman here, and you don't know it. And you have reason to potentially think about that because you were primed coming in knowing we're going to talk about deception, yet you just pretty much accept, oh, yeah.
But I think the way to
Jamy.
think about that is what's at stake,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
That's
so that's
really the
the
way for
tip
people
point, right?
to think about it. Because if, how much do you have to think about, is that my name or not? Because what impact would it have on you? None.
Sure.
None, right? It would have no impact at all. And so I think for people who are critical thinkers, and of course, you're absolutely right. I don't think it's so much that we just accept every piece of information we hear or presented with, depends on the source, but I think we are programmed to accept someone looking us in the face and speaking. And we are programmed to accept that as true. I think it is very difficult for human beings
Sure.
to believe that a person can look them right in the eye and lie. And that is counterintuitive. And I think that is a biological programming for the reasons you mentioned, that we are social animals.
Right.
Nick, did you want to add something on this?
I 100% agree with you. And part of the world you learn in the intelligence community, and why you become psychotic, I'm sorry, Jonna, why we become psychotic over a period of time, is that you are reprogrammed to think differently. I mean, the training is such that, look, you vary your routes every day, and it's just constant. I to this day, sometimes my cell phone's on or off or left or not, just so I don't leave an electronic signature. Is there any reason for that? No, absolutely not. I mean, however, that stuff gets embedded in your head. And for me personally, John, I can't speak for you, but getting out of that and showing up at a university, it took me 2 years to calm down. It took me a year and a half to calm down and just start to think differently. Because every time someone would look and I go, oh, his eyes, recall, upper right. And he's recalling, something what he's thinking about, which is all stuff that you're...
It's NLP,
Right.
which doesn't exist.
Well, in training, it exists.
So,
You've
that's
been
the
taught
thing.
pseudoscience.
That's what
You were
the
taught
science...
NLP about the look up to the right and what it indicates.
So the science says that you accept things as true unless you're triggered. There's got to be some mechanism that causes you to become skeptical. And that's where the skeptical thinking is really a great tool to protect yourself against scams and things like that. Nick is highly triggered in any area that he was trained in. So Nick's less likely to trust somebody to say who they are and what they do at face value in certain circumstances than anybody else in this room would be. But there's other situations, like Jamy was saying, if there's low stakes, he's just meeting somebody, comes up after the panel and says, oh, hey, my name's Dave, and I just thought the panel was great, none of us would be triggered to think, I bet his name's not Dave. So circumstances and everything it definitely makes a difference. But we accept things as true unless we have a reason or a trigger not to. And so that trigger mechanism is different for every person, and it's reliant on your background, your situation, how you learn to think, how you pay attention. And when your life depends on it, everything can trigger you.
And how you pay attention, and it's a constant set of tension that your head is in. At least it was for me. But something Jonna mentioned yesterday, and you just touched on, was I'll put it as observational skills.
Sure.
What you see, because that's even a component in law enforcement. Being a trained observer, and that's at least for us a huge element of being able to of protecting yourself against deception. So it just I've noticed my skills in that fall a lot. Since I've left that world, used to be far more triggered for just about everything that happened. A bird, what the hell?
Nick, that's called paranoia, and they think a lot of us are paranoid, but we were so thoroughly trained, for instance, in detecting surveillance, and that was sometimes a kind of life or death thing, not for us so much as the people that we would be working with, the foreigners, but it took me years before I stopped walking down a street and just automatically just checking who's there and did I just see them a block away and what's going on. But I would say I was in Paris at one point with my husband and my young son, and I was doing some photography, and I'm walking down the river in Paris by Notre Dame, and there were two guys there, and I said, my brain, it set it off, and I said, that is surveillance. And there would be no reason in the world for the French to be following me on that trip. I was retired CIA, I had a kid, my husband was there, we were on holiday. The long and short of it was surveillance, and I spotted them, and I actually had a tripod and a camera, and I set it up, and I took a picture of Notre Dame, and I made sure they were in the frame, and so they exited around the corner. Two more guys came in, and they followed me that morning. And I found out years later why they were following me. It was because it was the 4th of July. It was because I had called the American embassy the day before and asked whether they're doing the normal thing of opening the gates to Americans currently in Paris. And they said, no, ma'am, we're not doing that this year. They didn't tell me that there was this huge terrorist threat on the American embassy in Paris that day. And that's why they were out there, and they were following me. They were wondering, who the hell is she? I mean, who was this woman that called the embassy and wants to know if she can get in? So the triggers were still there, but they were latent until actually I bumped into surveillance and recognized it. I thought that was amazing.
It's what we call a healthy state of paranoia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we said in the 60s, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean somebody's not trying to get you.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
We always said once is an accident, help me, Nick, once is an accident, twice a coincidence, and the third time is an act of war.
Oh, yeah.
We thought that was true.
Wow. Nick, you were mentioning about law enforcement, and I know that the whole lie detector, like we're trying to find some objective way to tell if people are lying. So can you talk about lie detectors?
Just a bit. So I think the standard accuracy for lie detector is 65% or something like that. My understanding of it, if you talk to the polygraphers that give you lie detector tests, they'll tell you you can beat the polygrapher, you don't beat the polygraph. Mm-hmm. So it's just detecting.
I would like to respond to that.
Respond away.
So, in your culture, in the intelligence community, you are raised to believe as part of your culture that the polygraph works. You're the ones that believe it. I don't mean you individually, but it is a part of that community.
That's true.
The fact of the matter is that the polygraph is complete and utter pseudo-science. I do not say this as a matter of degree. The polygraph is garbage. Mm-hmm. People who believe in it are the operators who are trained, just like the practitioners of NLP, which happened to come up a moment ago when you talk about that thing about looking up. Mm-hmm. Nonsense. Pseudoscience, neurolinguistic programming, no science to support it, no published science. It's an industry that supports itself. And the polygraph is the same. And the thing that, if the polygraph was actually measuring anything, it would measure nervousness. Okay, if you dig down at all, just the basics of how a polygraph works. Most of the ideas of how polygraphs are even designed are wrong. There's, whenever you see it in a movie, they ask these baseline questions. That's not how it works at all. Actually, that's because it's much harder to understand how it supposedly works. But if it measured anything, it would measure nervousness. Under the premise, the operating assumption that if you lie, you are nervous, which means I'm a fictional being because I have spent my entire life lying to people on stage, effectively, and I'm not nervous. And professional con artists are not nervous. So the thing about polygraphs, and there's really good information, and I will send you a really good source. There's a guy who's there's a guy who was in intelligence or was in government and who got driven out because of a bad polygraph test and has made it like a mission for decades and written a really good little book that you can get online. And I will send you that stuff, Nick. But the thing to understand is, we know, right, that polygraph is used in certain areas of society, but it's not admissible in court, right? Thank God for that. Well, why is that? Well, it was a compromise law when the two sides of Congress used to actually work together and make laws when they were looking at the polygraph, Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy, opposite sides of the aisle, were addressing what was going to be the legal standing and the legal use of the polygraph. And so Kennedy wanted to restrain its use and basically put into the law that it could not be used for employment, could not be used in the civilian and business world for employment, thank goodness. But because the intelligence community depends on it, it was permitted in that area of government. And it is a thing that the intelligence community swears by and uses a lot. And part of the real thing about what makes where the polygraph is used, quote unquote, effectively, is it scares people into confessing. And that's a very interesting side of it. But the polygraph is pseudoscience.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Because there's no way that Jamy could know that my first husband at CIA was a polygraph operator. No, John, not Tony.
Oh.
My
Is
first,
that right? No, I
my
never
first
knew
husband
that.
was a polygraph operator, and he practiced on me a couple of times, and then we quit that.
Oh,
And
God,
eventually,
you are so warped.
eventually, I divorced this man. So I'm not totally disagreeing with what Jamy said, but I always thought that the results of the polygraph were dependent on the operator, but I thought that the value of the polygraph was in deterrence. Everybody at CIA knew, well, they had a polygraph when they came in, so they knew what it was, and nobody liked it. And they knew that within, theoretically, 5 years, they would be given a polygraph again. So when somebody's holding out, some weed or some stuff we shouldn't be doing, our people tended to just back off from all of that, saying, I can't do that because I have a polygraph coming up. I think a lot of decisions were made knowing that they were going to be on a polygraph. So I think it served.
Yes, that is how it's used.
It served a purpose, but not the purpose that it was advertised for.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean,
So we agree, but
there's this has come up in television in fictional settings. It's based on a real story, supposedly, of a local police force who brought a guy in and they're trying to accuse him of a crime and they're trying to get him to confess, and they put a metal colander on his head with 2 wires that went to a photocopy machine where they had loaded a piece of paper, right? And they asked him about the crime, and then pushed a button, and the paper came out and said liar, and then he confessed.
Talk about a deception.
This is not far off the purpose it actually serves. That's the thing.
I'm not going to. We can jump into this afterwards. This little discussion.
No, let's do it now.
There's an incredible case in the Reagan administration. I can't think of it. A guy high up in the government who was being blocked from a job, could have had his career destroyed. Famous guy. I can't think of it.
He was the head of public affairs for DOD.
Yeah,
and it was what was his name? He went into media.
And the problem was so Reagan wanted to fire him because he was connected to a story that broke in the New York Times, right? And they were looking at leakers, right?
Right.
There's always that, White House always comes around to, this is the 6 months window that we're going to crush all the leakers, right? That happens every administration. So, and this guy took a polygraph, failed, took another one, failed, okay? And so in an unprecedented, literally unprecedented, never before, never since, they managed to arrange a phone call between the Sulzberger, top guy at the New York Times, and the president in the Oval Office, and say, because the paper would never give up the source of the real source, right? And that's what it was at issue. And they got Sulzberger on a call with Reagan, pretty sure it was Sulzberger, who said, we're not going to tell you who the source was, in this one case only, and we will never do this again. It was not him. He was not the source. And this is after failing 2 polygraphs.
Wow. Oh, hit a nerve there. That's outstanding. I love that.
Yeah.
So we have a microphone.
Just one last thing.
Well, let me get the people lined up for the mic, and then you can do your last thing while people are coming up. So we have a microphone here for folks to ask questions. Don't touch it, please. Nick, go ahead.
So I don't know how it was in those, that political appointments are in a different category than regular government employees, but you can't be fired for failing a polygraph. You know that?
No, they wanted to, right,
Right. A polygraph is an investigative tool only,
Yeah.
so
Right, but
it
you
can
understand
trigger the
the
investigators.
context of
but-
the idea of a leak. You leaked from a
Right.
story from
Got it,
inside,
got
so
it,
that's
got
the
it.
reason to fire him.
Right.
Okay. Oh, we have a question.
Hi, I was wondering what you thought of the differences between pathological liars and like trained actors,
That's a great question.
as far as their deception methods go.
The pathological liars make money, the trained actors usually don't.
Brilliant.
Thank you and good night.
So it's an interesting thing. I've got a little bit of academic work and studies on the pathological liar thing, because I think in the field it's not as well defined as it should be for studying purposes, for doing research. But typically, so people don't lie typically if the truth will serve its purpose. Okay? So if my son says, "Hey, am I adopted?" He's not. I would never tell him he is. If I love my son, right? Like there's just no reason to lie. Imagine if you go on a date and it is an amazing date, right? You just like jive with this person. You want to see them again. All you can think about is your second date, and you get to their doorstep and they say, "Did you have a good time?" You're never going to say no. You don't lie if the truth will serve a purpose. The exception to that are pathological liars. There are times that pathological liars will actually lie when the truth serves a better purpose. And I think that this is one of the reasons we have a misunderstanding of maybe the definition, because I think that there still has to be that motivation to lie. And that lie, there's something about pathological liars that get like a serotonin boost if they lie, and they get by with it. So it does serve a purpose. Academically, a lot of people believe it doesn't. I personally, there's not enough research to show this yet. So I'm not making this claim, but I do believe that is why pathological liars will lie even when the truth does serve a purpose, because they're getting some physiological, some mental, something they need by telling lies. Professional actors do not. They have a purpose. They know that they are to play a role, and if they don't properly play that role and lie,
They're also not lying. They're not lying.
Yeah, they're not lying.
Actors are not
right?
liars.
Yeah, so actually it's not lying.
It's not an applicable comparison.
Yeah, so
Actors are dealing in pretense and
that's 100%.
imagination.
100%. I was just talking about from the motivation within the head. It's different. But Jamie's 100% right.
Yeah, when your child, ties a towel around him and goes flying through the house as Superman, he's not lying. He's using imagination, right? That's what.
We have a hotel full of those people.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, every one of these people in a costume is not a liar.
So there's four or five different.
They're exploring their imagination. Now I'm a little different. I'm a professional magician. That's a little different. I am a professional liar, and I do use deception very deliberately, deceptive skills, for an artistic purpose, to create an artistic experience. And my interest in magic, that from the age of 7, is part and parcel of what ended up making me a skeptic, which was that I was obsessed with the truth, what the nature of truth is. So I'm actually I was a compulsively honest child, interested in the idea of deception and in distinguishing between the two. And the skeptic movement is about testable claims and how you determine what is and is not true. It's very different than what an actor does.
So there's several different academic definitions of deception based on kind of who you follow, but they all have a few things that are similar. And it's it's an intentional act to mislead without prior notification. So with actors, you know that they're not who they say they are. They're acting. So there's that prior notification. There's a social agreement. But to lie, a lie, and it's got to be intentional. It has to be an act trying to deceive somebody else without that prior notification. So maybe that kind of helps you understand from that point. Great, thank you.
I have a good example, just to close the subject out. Nick will appreciate this, because my first husband and Nick worked in similar jobs where they created, how can we say this, Nick? Created documents that were deceptive. Tony was hired kind of as a counterfeiter forger.
That's a better way of saying it.
Puts that pretty much in a box. And so for a living, my husband could reconfigure all kinds of documents. He did that 8 to 5, 5 days a week. So we ended up out of the airport one day. We were going friends. We had a little boy with us, had a pile of luggage, and this kid, I couldn't move. I'm stuck with this mountain of luggage. And Tony's presenting the passports to Air France, and mine, fine. Jesse's fine. Tony's, the Air France guy. Tony made his day because the Air France guy was just awful, and he picked up Tony's passport like it was a dead rat, and he said, this is expired. So Tony comes slinking over to the pile of luggage and me, and he said, he's this big docs guy at CIA, and his passport is expired, and he said to me, he said, 5 minutes in the men's room, and I can fix this. But here's the punchline. But then he stopped and he said, well, I said something like Tony, and he said, oh yeah, he said, that would be a felony, wouldn't it? So it's a good example of how deception can work.
So did he fix it?
He did not.
Oh.
He did not. We went down to K Street, and he got a new passport in 24 hours.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Yes,
That's great.
please.
Oh, my God.
Amazing.
For people that are college days, you're wanting to go back into education, what would be a good, I guess, like career path, or career path is not the right word, academic path that you would say? I have a bachelor's in intelligence studies, but the psychology of behavior modification and things like that has always been super fascinating. But the world is so full of degree options and certificates and things like that. If we're interested in deception from a good person point of view, like not a like evil mastermind mindset, possibly, what's a good option or things to look at in your all's experiences with this field to say, like, here's some things to look at?
So part of it's going to be what is your goal with the degree? Because if you're wanting to work for like the CIA or something, it's completely different than if you want to be a research scientist like myself. So there are a lot of options. I would think to myself, like, I'm gonna play dad now. I have 3 kids. I've got one that's going on to do a PhD soon. I've got another one that's about to graduate with architecture degree, who was fully scholarship, a bunch of other scholarships in aerospace engineering. One of the most intuitive in math of people I've ever met, and 6 months into college was absolutely miserable. And I said, what's wrong? And they're like, I hate this. I hate math. They're like, whoa, you're great at math. Like, yeah, but I didn't know that I hated it until I got to college. And I'm like, well, I can promise you this. You will be happier in life making $50,000 a year doing something you love than $200,000 a year going to a job you hate. Mm-hmm. So he goes, but if I leave, I'll lose all these scholarships. I said, that does not matter. Find what you want to do. I wanted to be a professional magician, and people told me I was insane. And I could have taken paths that were quite different and maybe made more money, but I am so glad I took that path. So my recommendation is, as a father, think about what you want. Think about the different degrees that you could do and where those lead, and determine how you think your life is going to be happiest, and pursue that path.
It's good advice.
Excellent. Next.
So are there any fairly foolproof ways to tell if somebody is lying?
No.
That you have?
No.
Ask them.
Okay, next. No.
Yeah, the most reliable method is, without using coercion, get them to confess. Now, people false confess, so you can't be too forceful. But honestly, using evidence and talking to somebody, and like 60% of the time, the best is just an honest confession.
So, but you will hear, besides the polygraph, you will read about something called micro expressions, which were quote unquote discovered by a guy named Paul Ekman. And micro expressions are an interesting thing, and some of you may have, there was a popular television series a few years ago. I forget what it was called.
Lie to Me.
Right, Lie to Me, there you go. And Lie to Me was based loosely on the idea of micro expressions, and the idea was that the main character had a sort of supernormal skill of recognizing micro expressions. And Paul Ekman was a consultant to the show, made a lot of money selling bogus classes. Oh, did I mention he was a con man? Selling classes.
He still does.
Believe me, I know.
Still up.
I know.
Yeah.
And he books all sorts of classes about how you can use microexpressions. Now, if, to the extent that there is any possible truth, there is some demonstrable use of microexpressions, but they are so small and they are so rapid that they can only be detected through slowing down video recording and examining it, and freeze framing it and examining it. And that's the only aspect of micro expressions that are possibly workable, that there may be some basis there. And that's how Eklund made his reputation. But he published about that in the 1970s, and the number of referee journal articles that he has published since in the continuing advancement of his research is zero, which is about the value of microexpressions.
So the Bond and DiPaolo did a metadata analysis of all of the research articles that were available from like Eggman's work in the 50s all the way up and through 2006 when they published. Actually, they did it through like 2004, published 2006. And across the board...
That wasn't Ekman that published in the 2000s.
No, the Bond and DiPaolo metadata was 2006.
Okay.
Yeah. They researched up through 2004, starting with Ekman's work in 59.
Gotcha.
And they found that its accuracy rate across studies is 54%. 54%. Little better than a coin flip. Now, the most interesting thing about that is it's not 50%.
Right.
Because you could just guess at 50%. There's 4% more, right? And so the future research, or not future, but from 2006 on, research into that, one of the indicators is that there are certain people that are just really bad at lying. About 4%. Wow. So, as a matter of fact, each study, if you look at the studies, the larger the sample size, the closer it is to 54%.
Wow.
Right? So if you get somebody that's like 70% accurate, oh, well, we looked at 12 people. Okay? But you can take, I've seen a bank of 100 videos, and you can show these to experts, you can show them to laymen, you can show them to high school students. And about 4% of those people, almost everybody will say they're lying, and they're lying. And out of everybody else, it's about 50-50. And then there's about 4% of people that it's just indistinguishable whether they lie or not, to like everybody you can show. So it's more reliant on the person and not the person trying to detect the deception.
Yeah, and this is a good caution in general about the whole idea of body language, because you go to the bookstore and you'll find a little shelf, self-help books, whatever, and pop psychology, and you'll find multiple books about reading body language, and none of them agree with each other because they're all horse shit. So all the stuff that you've learned about, if someone's standing like this, it means they're hostile to the conversation, blah, blah. Nothing. That's garbage. It's all garbage.
The first book published on that was in BC. It was a couple thousand years ago.
Yeah.
And even then, you look back, there's one bodily tell that's like almost every culture and every book ever published is this idea of gaze aversion, not looking somebody in the eye. And as Jamy elegantly put that, it's still horseshit.
Yeah, because that can be motivated by
Right.
all sorts
Right.
of other things.
For
besides
every
me.
person that won't look in the eye because they're lying, someone else will because they're nervous.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh, let's get off that topic, please. We're still PG. Okay.
First of all, thank you guys so much for this panel. This is a lot of fun.
I love the vibe, by the way.
Yeah, I apologize for the sunglasses. I got
No,
these lights
don't.
right in my eyes, and I
Don't.
want you guys to like
I'm
read
jealous,
my eye movements
so.
or anything.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I am alone in that, especially in recent years, I've had some discord in my family between different people who believe different things. And sometimes that can go past the level of, oh, we're disagreeing about a topic over the dinner table, into we can't relate to each other, we can't have conversations. It really has a big cost. And so I'm curious if you guys can lend any kind of insight into when you're having those conversations with someone that you care about, how do you talk about something that's reliable? How do you talk about something that has a truthiness quality to it in a way that, you know, is still loving and still compassionate?
Change the subject.
Stop talking about politics.
No, I mean, look,
I'm asking this question specifically because, like, they're not talking about politics stuff. At a certain point, it's hard to go through life and never talk about this.
Well, what if you got like
it's part of the world.
You mean like a cult or something like that, or if somebody
Not
who's
that
being
extreme.
deceived, or
Within a standard deviation of like modern political discourse.
Okay, well, so I don't know, you know, politics aside, but like maybe something like somebody who is sending money to a psychic or something like that. Would that fall within your parameters?
There has been stuff. So I'm specifically talking about my dad. There has been stuff where he's had like, oh, here's someone predicting something that's going to happen politically in the next few years, and he's saying that I should buy gold because of it.
It's my dad.
Does anybody?
A lot of people's dads.
Anybody want to comment?
yeah, so I mentioned in another panel, it's worth reiterating here, I think. So skeptics tend to think that it's just a matter of evidence. And skeptics think that people who believe crazy stuff, non-existent stuff, lack evidence. That's not true. Everybody thinks they have evidence for what they believe. Even, you know, a flat earther believes they have evidence for what they believe. The problem is it's lousy evidence. The problem is it's the difference between what's good evidence, what's bad evidence. And that speaks to a larger thing, which is individuals' worldview, how they judge information, what they're inclined to believe. We like to think that we collect evidence and then we decide what we believe. That's not true. We decide what we believe. We adopt we were raised in a worldview or whatever, and then we tend to select evidence, which may be true, it may be accurate, but might not be, to support our point of views. My point here is that when you turn to someone who's telling you about their horoscope and the accuracy of astrology, and you start to present them with some evidence to the contrary, they get upset. They get upset, they get angry, they get defensive. Why is that? It's not because of their commitment to astrology, it's because of their commitment to a worldview of which their belief in astrology is a piece, is a part, right? So, therefore, presenting evidence is not the way to pursue your argument. And your best chance, if you have any chance at all, is to go very small around the edges and to ask questions like, well, what would change your mind? That's always a good question to ask, I think. What would change your mind about this thing you believe, or this person you believe in, right? Or what would be the advantage? What is this person doing for you? If it's someone who's taking money from you, like for a psychic reading or business advice or whatever the hell it is. And to try and just chip away a little bit at the edges to have them question that and what is the other person's motive and things like that. But it's actually a very difficult thing to change someone's mind about these things because it's difficult to change a person's worldview, right? And you know, there are certain pseudosciences that tend to be believed in and embraced, for example, that coincide with being politically left, and there are certain that coincide with being politically right. And I've always been fascinated by the fact that anti-vaxxism crossed over. It actually originally came out of the left because of a sort of naturalistic worldview that is sometimes present in the left. That's vague. My point is not about the politics. My point is about the worldview, right? So there's the naturalistic fallacy is if it's natural, it's good, you know, and also what as part of that worldview is things like maybe at the more extreme level, but is things like, you know, you're going to get better medical advice that you should listen to from your yoga instructor than from your doctor, because your doctor is in business with big pharma.
I
Yeah,
want my
you know.
paycheck from them.
So that's a worldview that contributed to the popularity of anti-vaxxism in the beginning, and then it crossed over because then it became part of the worldview of the right in a much bigger scale because of COVID. So there's no simple answer really to your question. And this panel was allegedly about how to protect yourself from deception. And when one of the earliest skeptic group, I've started several, been involved with more, but the first one I ever started was National Capital Area Skeptics in Washington, D.C. in 1987. They're still in business. And we made up a button that said, "That's nice, prove it." And "That's nice, prove it" is a really good way to live in the world. Really good way. And I do that in conversation all the time. And when somebody says, a variation on that, if somebody says, "What's your sign?" And I say, "Well, if you believe in astrology, you should tell me." Right? And then they say, "Oh, well, yeah, well, haha, that's clever, but what is it?" And I go, "Well, no, you should tell me." And so then I make them make a guess, and I go, "Wrong, 11 to go." And then I make them make another, and I'll have that conversation. I've had it many times, where I'll make them go through 7 fails. And man, do they hate me. Which is great. I don't really give a shit. Okay? Because I speak the truth as I see it. And that's the way I make my way in the world. But I'll bet you the next time they have a conversation about astrology, they're going to be hearing my annoying voice in their head going, "Yeah? Prove it."
Also, don't be too disappointed or hard on yourself if it doesn't work, because it's not a function of what
Absolutely.
you did. Right?
Yeah.
We have internal biases and things from where we were raised that we just can't shake sometimes. And I talked to a guy that was a journalism major, and we were disagreeing. He believed that climate change wasn't a thing. And so I literally went and pulled research article after research article after research article. I said, I'll grab some sources, you grab some sources, and let's compare them. And he has a master's degree in journalism, and he pulled off 3 websites that were shown to be faulty websites, bad information. Like, wait a second, how do you vet your sources? And he has not talked to me since.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
all right, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Hi, my name's Alex, or is it? No, so whether someone is personally in your life, you have a family, sibling, coworker, or it's somebody on the world stage, a la George Santos, right? Why do people in whichever position do they pick such poor lies and then double down on them, right? Like, if you're going to lie to somebody and deceive for your purposes outside of, white lies, I get it. We have our purposes, but why pick such bad lies?
So I'll take a stab. So 2% of the population is sociopathic. Okay? That means that we all know 100 people. Typically, we know 1 or 2 sociopaths in the course of our lives.
Or it's you.
And, well, yeah, if you look around the room. And because, actually in my case, because I'm gregarious and because I travel the world and I'm a performer and a public figure and so on and so forth, instead of knowing 1 or 2 sociopaths in my life, I've been face to face with at least half a dozen really pretty serious sociopaths.
Yeah, try working for the CIA.
Well, but that's right. So here's the thing. People hear that word or variations on that word. Psychopathic keeps changing the definitions and so forth. But let's use sociopath. So people think about sociopaths and violent crime, but the violent criminals, serial killers, are just 1 to 2% of sociopaths. Okay, so the rest of all those sociopaths, they're functional, and not only are they functional, but in certain fields they succeed, right? Especially in business, marketing, sales, because they can make a kind of purity of decision without worrying about the consequences on human beings, the human consequences. Okay, so a lot of people who are perpetual liars. It may or may not be sociopathology, but a part of it may well be sociopathology because they're also self-deceived. And the people who lie constantly are people who think they're really good liars and they're not. And you probably all know somebody like this, right? At least, you know, I have known people like this who think they're the best liars in the world and they're just the worst. Are you really kidding me? So I think when you see someone like a figure like that, that's a person who thinks they're a good liar, and they also have. But to me the sociopathology guess comes in is they think that lying is a way to live. Okay, there are people in the world who think that things like truth, words like truth, friendship, loyalty, love. There are people in the world who think those words are fictions. They think those words, I'm not exaggerating, they think those are words that people use in books or in high language, but aren't really real because that's not how the world really works. And the way the world really works is you just screw over the next guy at every chance. Okay.
Or other cultures, I'll just throw in other cultures, you get a dramatically different perspective on friendship,
Yes.
on love, on,
Yes.
on all those things.
Right. So you're looking at a person who, you know, is lying because they think that's the way to live.
Yeah.
They're not looking at it the way we are and go, there's something wrong with you, dude. You know. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are the ones who beat the poly. I'm just saying.
Wait, I missed it.
He said those are the ones that beat the polygraph.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
In this room, we presumably mostly believe that conspiracy theories are BS because you can't get 1,000 people to fake the moon landing or the Kennedy assassination. Nobody talks about it for 60 years. But we just heard about the Glomar expedition, which was a conspiracy theory that lasted for a decade or something like that. I was wondering if you'd like to talk about how you organize a conspiracy theory, how big it can be, how long it could last, and if you have anything to say about the Kennedy assassination, we'd listen to that.
About what?
Kennedy assassination.
Oh,
No,
we have a talk tomorrow.
I'm kidding about that.
We have a talk tomorrow on the Kennedy assassination.
Okay. But as the CIA,
or at least
as
gonna
the
talk
CIA, how big can conspiracies be and be successful? How long can you pull them off?
Well, what you're calling a conspiracy, I think we're calling a deception. Are we talking about the same thing?
You have hundreds of people involved, and you get everybody to stay secret about it.
It's a deception operation. Yeah, because if the Russians figured out that we were after their sub, they would have known where it was, and they would have run us out of the water.
Is it just people that are that loyal that nobody talked about it?
It's part of working at the CIA. You sign paperwork, and they haven't arrested me yet, although I'm probably getting higher and higher up on their list as I keep writing books.
But surely you have to get some civilians involved. I guess they don't know any of the.
The civilians that work with us, just like during the Argo thing, the Argo operation, we had Hollywood. Think about it. If you want to talk about a bunch of people who know how to lie, it's out in L.A. There's a big group of them that knew about the story of Argo. They were all signed to secrecy. They could have been prosecuted, but that was never really an issue. I think there's a difference. We call it a deception if it's something that is going to serve the United States government, if it was going to serve America's purposes. I don't consider that a conspiracy. I consider that a deception. I
agree with you.
I don't know. I don't know where the line really is. But I've never thought of it.
Well, a big part of the lie is conspiracy theories lack evidence.
Yeah. Well,
they're about inventing evidence to fill gaps.
I mean,
lack good evidence, to quote you. Well, they do have evidence, but lack good evidence.
Actually, yes, but
Right.
The but is that conspiracy theory typically relies on the absence of evidence, on gaps, and filling it, with claims.
Right.
Without evidence.
And misinterpreting good evidence.
And they say, well, no, we can't prove this evidence because it's concealed because 20,000 people lied about it. So I think it's a difference about the good evidence thing. It's often a complete lack of evidence.
I'll also throw a little bureaucratic approach to this, is that for deception activities, as Jonna was mentioning, things are also pretty tightly compartmented. So nobody knows, very few people, like the example of putting $10,000 in cash on a table. Nobody knows what that's for. Two people know, the person receiving it, and maybe the person who brought the suitcase.
And you mentioned on the Argo panel, Nick, about that the people were doing the documents. They don't know what that's for. They had no idea what the operation was for.
In the middle of the Argo operation, I found a letter a couple of months ago that was sent years ago to Tony Mendez, and he never got it. He never opened it. It was an unopened envelope. It was a man during Argo who was working for that fake Studio 6, the studio that they set up to rescue those Americans. And he was describing in the letter, he said, I was working there, and a man walked in while I was there, and he had a suitcase, and he opened it up, and it was full of money. He said it was about $10,000 in small bills. He said, a guy in a suit and a coat. He said, Mr. Mendez, my question is, was that you, sir? Well, it wasn't my husband, but I mean, around the world there are suitcases of money for good purposes, not for conspiracies. We might be paying somebody for information about a nuclear program here or about a plan to attack a country there. What can be read as a conspiracy can often, in our terms, be read as something not quite so evil sounding.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, we just have time for a couple more short questions.
Hi, I have recently been transitioning and whatnot, and I've been thinking more about voice and how it's a great way to deceive in different ways. You can work and change a lot of different accents and different ways that you talk, such as people in the South tend to say y'all and whatnot. Do you guys tend to do much training about that or anything similar?
We tried, in disguise, to change people's voices. It had to do with some radio programs that were on that we were part of, and we discovered that we could not. We built false palettes. We thought that might work, and all we ever were able to do was make people lisp.
So I actually did some. I grew up in Alabama. I couldn't book any shows west of Texas, west of the Mississippi, except for Texas. And typically my voice was a little higher. And I talked to somebody who said if you lose the accent and had a deeper, nicer tone, when you're talking to people trying to book shows on the phone, you'll do much better. I, for years, talked like this. This was my natural voice as I grew up, as I went through school. And I tried to book shows. Hey, my name's Curt Anderson. I'd like to book a show for you. I'm a magician. And I could not book shows. And so I started recording myself and worked on getting rid of that. And so that this is now my natural voice. And then when I'm on stage, this is my natural voice. Thank you for coming to the show. I appreciate it. My name's Curt Anderson. So you can work on it now. From the CIA's perspective, they can voice map me. They still know it's me. But you can work on your accent and, the little sweet little, hi, y'all. You can do those things. You can change some of that. So there is some things you can do. The last few years I performed, I did more shows in California than I did Alabama. And I could not book one when I talk like this.
I still am going to say y'all. So, hello.
Hey. So I just wanted to talk with you about being married to a sociopath and a...
She's married to Derek. She's with Derek. Y'all.
No. No, my first husband was a sociopath and a pathological liar.
Oh dear.
So
Can you get a little closer to the mic, please?
I will try.
Thank you.
It's my boobs that's a problem.
I get you, girl. I got you.
So in his case, he would lie about everything, anything, all the time. And a lot of it was in order to construct a worldview for himself, a long-term, he was setting himself up for a long-term life view. So he would lie about things to me and to other people so that months, years, at any time, at any point in life, to other people, his friends, his coworkers, people in church. He didn't believe in God. He didn't necessarily go to church, but he would go to church if they could be a resource for him, if he could use that as a component in his life construction. So that is an aspect of people that are sociopaths and are pathological liars that you may not get to see as a person outside of someone living with them. They lie not only for the boost that gives them, I mean, it absolutely does. It thrills them to be able to take advantage of people using those lies, but it's on a deeper level because they have a long game, not just a short-term hit of yeah, I've done it this time. It's a plan to get something more.
Yeah.
It's always got a plan for
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm very sorry you went through it. We are out of time. I'm so sorry. The panelists, if y'all are so inclined, can have further discussion out at our table over next to the escalators. And thank you so much for joining our panel. We'll give you a couple of seconds for some shameless plugs. Nick?
None.
None. Kurt?
Nope, good.
Nope. Jonna?
I have a new book out called In True Face about being a woman in the CIA.
Fantastic.
It's fresh, it's new.
Yay. Okay, Jamy?
And John and I will be, among others, will be on a 7 o'clock panel in this room about deception.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.